Space, the final frontier. These are the podcasts of the podcast Enterprise. Its only mission to explore story structures, to analyze our favorite characters and plot lines, to boldly talk about what
Hello
everyone
and
has
welcome
seen
everyone
before.
to Podcast Enterprise. This is a podcast series where we take the episodes of Star Trek, the original series, dissect it for story structure, character arcs, things that we like, don't like, and that's how it goes. And we talk about general stuff about the episode. That's what we do. I am Bala Ramadurai, and with me I have my co-host Parvati Ramkumar. Say hello, Parvati.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our podcast. I'm so excited to discuss Mud today.
Mud is
Yes,
back with a vengeance. You can see he's out there to get Captain Kirk or Jimmy
yes,
McCoy,
he
as
is.
he calls him. Okay, all right. Over to you for the synopsis.
Okay, so right when this episode starts, you know something is wrong because there's a new crew member aboard the Enterprise. Dr. McCoy does not like Norman. Norman is very odd. Spock, of course, does not notice because Norman is cold and emotionless and Spock likes that. But Dr. McCoy knows that there's something wrong with Norman. Dr. McCoy's suspicions are not entirely unfounded because Norman goes into the engineering section. He tampers with the controls. He takes over the ship's controls, puts them on some sort of an automatic drive so that it goes straight towards a particular planet. Nothing that Sulu on the bridge does can alter the course of the Enterprise. And now Captain Kirk is very worried because they are supposed to be somewhere else and they're going into another direction. And Norman seems to be a lot stronger than the average human. He makes his way to the bridge. He talks to Captain Kirk and he says that they're going to a particular planet. Captain Kirk has no business stopping the ship from going to that planet. And any attempt to change course or to override the controls that Norman has programmed into the ship will result in the ship's destruction. And Spock confirms that this will happen. Therefore, Kirk cannot do anything but wait for those 4 solar days that it takes to reach this planet that Norman is talking about. And Norman also reveals that he is an android during this time. He's not human, and that's why he's been behaving odd all this time. Now, when they get to this peculiar planet, Norman, who has deactivated himself, reactivates himself and says that Kirk, Chekhov, Uhura, McCoy, and Spock must beam down to the planet. Everybody else must stay aboard the Enterprise. And if they don't do what he says, again, he threatens them with engine destruction and various other forms of destruction. So Kirk decides to beam down. Once they are there on that planet, they find themselves in a network of tunnels which are habitable for humans. And they meet up with an old nemesis of his called Harry Mudd. Now, this character actually appeared in a previous episode. He's back. He's a smuggler. He's a criminal. He's a thief. And he's also extremely entertaining. What we learn now is that Mudd has captured this planet. He has kept all of these androids as servants. There is some technology here that allows him to create more androids. He creates more and more androids, mostly female, so that he can have some fun with them. But this scheme of his has backfired because the androids have decided that he's a very interesting human specimen and they want to study him and they want to use him to lure more humans to this planet so that they can study them also. And to Mudd's amusement, he manages to capture Captain Kirk and the Enterprise and not just some random ship. There were a lot of coincidences. The androids start revealing themselves more and more. They are completely logical, placid. They cannot be swayed this way or that. And as Dr. McCoy says, they are physically and mentally perfect. Nothing can reach them. They are created by some sort of an alien civilization, apparently from the galaxy of Andromeda. They study the humans and then they decide that the humans are too violent and impulsive and therefore they will serve the humans and bring them under control. Eventually that turns into they will serve the humans and bring the galaxy under control, much to Kirk's alarm. This also affects Mudd because he becomes a prisoner of the androids as well. They find him as illogical as the rest of the humans. And Kirk, to escape this prison that they find themselves in, must come up with something creative so that he can literally short circuit those androids and work their logic against them. And to do this, towards the end of this episode, what we see is that Kirk employs certain illogical ways of dealing with the androids. He talks about being in captivity and then being happy while he's in captivity. He tells the androids that humans must work themselves to death to be happy, and all sorts of nonsensical dialogue follows after that. And Norman is something of a conduit for all of these androids. There are several. He targets Norman with his absolute nonsense and illogic, thereby short circuiting Norman and confusing him and deactivating him, and then releasing all of the other androids from this sort of control. After that, they are free. The androids are reprogrammed to just do work on the planet and not have any grandiose ambitions of taking over the galaxy. Harry Mudd, however, must stay back on that planet. He is given a replica of his shrewish wife as an android, so to keep him in check. And Kirk and the others, they leave him there and go back to the Enterprise and leave orbit. Back to you, Bala.
All right. Here also we have the four-act structure. It starts off with a rather long teaser where we get to know that Norman is this new character on board. That's where the teaser starts. And strangely, out of character is the teaser having a banter between Spock and McCoy. And it ends with us knowing that Norman is not normal, is not human, is an android. So that's what we get to see is circuits, and we get to know that there's some reason why this android has taken over the ship. So him taking over the ship is pretty much the teaser. In the first act, a rather short first act, we find that this sophisticated android just switches off in power off mode for 4 solar days and turns himself back on. And when the act ends, they beam down to the planet and they're facing Harry Mudd. And he calls himself Mudd the First. So he seems to be in total control and seems to be telling them that they're going to be here for the rest of their lives. So that's how first act ends. We know that Mud is behind all of this, taking over and somehow is controlling the android. The second act starts with us getting to know that there are these Alices, the androids. There are about 500 Alices. And also we get to know at the start how Mud broke out of jail or wherever he was through completely illegal means to get out and finally reach this planet. At the end of the second act, all the this is supposed to be a prison sort of a thing that the crew is captured. So it was only the landing party to begin with at the start of second act. Now it seems like the entire crew is on the planet, including Scott, who has joined them. And slowly we start seeing the crew members liking the experience on the planet. That's how you're just starting to see that in the second act. Scotty is here as well. Third act is all about finding out that the people, the crew members from the Enterprise, are loving it here on the planet with the androids serving them. And there's so many challenges and so many things that people like. In fact, you get to know that this is really good because Chekhov at one point says it's better than Leningrad. So that tells you that this is something way better than what he can even imagine. So that's how the third act starts with Kirk wondering what are people loyal to? Are they loyal to these things that they are finding on the planet, or is it the Enterprise and Starfleet and so on? At the end of third act is us finding out that Norman is going to take care of them. And this time the take care is a threat because he says he's going to serve, or they are going to serve and control the entire human race. Serve and control the entire human race equal to a threat for the species. That's what we find out at the end of the third act. So it's no longer the landing party, which is at the end of the first act, no longer the entire crew, which is at the second act. Now it's the entire human race. The entire fourth act is dedicated to them trying to defeat the androids, what they are really bad at, which is creative thinking. There are 200,000 odd of them androids. It's going to be impossible for them to try and take on each one of them. Spock comes off with his study of these androids, saying that there's only one Norman and so many other copies of other androids, but only one Norman. There's no copy of Android normal at all, which leads them to think that they should concentrate their efforts on deactivating, or whatever they have to do, they have to aim it at normal. So that's the entire rest of the fourth act, with lots of nonsensical plays and over the top, I don't know what you call it, humor or whatever it was, seemed to confuse the heck out of the androids. Each of them deactivate, and at the end, Norman also blows up with a very cartoonish smoke coming from his ears at the end, because he couldn't take Harry Mudd or Kirk or any of the other stuff that's going on. That's how it ends. That's the ending, but the resolution part, the last part of it, is of course us coming to know that Stella is Shrewish wife. I love the term, Harry's wife. Now he hated one copy of her. Now he has 500 of them made by the Android production company, I guess. But just to annoy Mud, Kirk has made 500 of them, and now Mud has to face them on the planet along with the androids and Stella's nagging selves, so to speak. So that's how it actually, the last dialogue is what I really like, which is the crew telling Mud, Harry, have fun, and they all leave. So that was the end of the fourth act. Okay. So what did you think of I Mud, or Mud the First?
I enjoyed it. It was so over the top and humorous, and I enjoyed it. And I really like Mud's fashion sense. It was nice to
Yes.
He looked like such a space pirate. In the beginning, when he's trying to explain to Kirk how he got there in the first place, he tried to gloss over the fact that he had stolen patents, that he had illegally sold them to the Denibians, and then they captured him and they fired at him. And he tried to use some spectacular vocabulary and literary phrases to explain why he was there in the first place, but Kirk saw right through him. That was really funny.
Yeah,
And
and he interjects saying, "Oh, knowledge should be free."
yes.
Just because I stole knowledge from the Vulcans doesn't make it wrong. I mean, because knowledge has to be free.
It has to be free and should be shared by everyone. And what are they doing? Trying to charge for it. So he's got his ideas, and he's got a very twisted sense of humor, and trying to keep Kirk and the entire crew there as prisoners. He doesn't. And I'm very curious as to how and why he created 500 of those Alices. What is he going to do with so many of them that look alike? And
I
yeah,
think he just is playing with the fact that I mean, there are these androids who listen to anything. So
yes,
and he's a guy who has an unbelievable fertile imagination, and
he does have an imagination.
yeah,
Yes.
and so he's been like, okay, guys, go and make 200 of them. Oh, maybe make 300 more of them. And I think that's how he's got to this level where he's able to do all these things, completely out of whack.
He's enjoying being the king of this planet for at least once in his life, because at home he's got Stella who's constantly yelling at him, and he comes out here and he has all of these androids doing his bidding, and he's even though he eventually realizes that they have imprisoned him there. At the
Mm.
beginning they let him believe that he is the king of that planet, and he has multiple female androids created so that he can just revel in it. I mean, all of these creatures are his subjects, and he
Correct.
is enjoying it. Yeah.
In fact, even when he goes back to square one, right, after all this drama, and now he comes to know that he's on parole and he has to be confined to the planet, he just
Mm.
looks up and says, this is not so bad. It's sort of a pleasure island for me. That's what he thinks, that this is what is going to happen. Like Jack Sparrow in many sense. You rightly pointed out, he's a space pirate, but he
Mm.
has those Jack Sparrow-ish traits in him. That's what is charming about him.
True.
Imaginative. He covers up. I mean, he gives us highfalutin entrepreneur when he has taken, clearly stolen a ship, and is going.
He's such a free flying devil may care. He's got a devil may care attitude. He's taking risks. He's
Yeah.
got all of these ideas about, knowledge being free. I don't know whether he actually believes it as long as he gets some money for it.
Yes.
And he can, constantly talk and talk and talk and talk. And he's
Yeah.
just so
Awesome
glib.
sales guy, huh? Awesome sales guy.
Awesome sales guy. He's so good at that, and he can convince you of anything except Spock, of course, as we learn later.
He sees right through him.
Yep. And he also says, I fail to understand why I would try convince my mother to buy falsified patents. The joke just goes over his head. It's no use.
Oh, Mr. Spock,
Yeah.
you're going to love it here. They all talk like you. It's
They
just-
all talk like you. The interesting part of Harry Mudd's character was that he is so jovial in the beginning and he thinks he's pulled a fast one on the Enterprise. But in
Hmm.
reality, he's a prisoner there just like the rest of them because the androids are several steps ahead of him also.
He
Yep.
poses as if he's the lord of this place. He's commanding the whole thing. Actually, it's the other way around, right?
Yes.
They say they serve him, but they're actually imprisoned him. Right? He doesn't show it off at all. He just poses as if he's the guy in control here.
True. He is not only a prisoner, he's some sort of a sample, a living sample for them to study. And they want more samples. And
Captain
he's trying.
Christopher Pike has a lesson to learn from this.
Oh, yes, he does. And this situation for Harry Mudd, I imagine, is so embarrassing that as he's trying to cover it up by, being so loud and over the top and trying to tell Kirk that I am the lord of this planet when actually he's the biggest prisoner of all time.
Let's start with the teaser itself. I loved
Yeah.
this teaser with the banter between Spock and McCoy. He says, "Oh, there's something off about him." The types, right? They keep
Yeah,
talking only work and no emotion. The guy doesn't
absolutely.
smile and all that. And then
And he
and
misses
then
his
Spock
physical
says, "Hey,
exams.
wait a second.
Yeah.
You just described me."
So he was also missing his physicals, so he wouldn't go for his medical exam. And
Hmm.
McCoy knows that there's something seriously wrong with him. And I love Spock's retort to that. He said he's probably afraid of your beads and rattles. So he's implying that Dr. McCoy is some sort of a witch doctor who's, using some sort of magical rituals, and Norman's scared of that. It's pretty
Yeah.
funny.
Exactly. And then that's the best part. Now he says, "Oh, I'm not talking about you. You are, different. Maybe it's the years, that's what
Yep,
makes
it's
all the difference."
weird.
He
True, disappointed ears, a dead giveaway. That was so good. And like you pointed out, it is a little longer than usual, but that was
Mm.
so good because it established the tone of the episode so well. And
Yes,
there's
yes.
going to be humor. And I was looking forward to it when I saw that.
Correct. It's a neat, capsule of the entire episode itself. About
Yes.
how one side you have this lighter, moments, and then there is this real threat of an android taking over. He knew all about the Enterprise, so probably took him just 72 hours to, get all the necessary information. He's gone to
Yes.
auxiliaries, he's shuttered that off. He's gone to emergency monitoring, he shut that off, and
Yeah,
he knows in and out of that ship, probably even more
exactly.
than Scotty now.
He's so comfortable there. He knows where to go. He knows what to do. And probably because he's an android, he doesn't hesitate. He just
Correct.
tosses people out of the way. He tosses those engineers out of the way and he just gets to work. He has no qualms about rigging the systems up so that if they try to change course or override his controls, the ship will blow up. And
Hmm,
he doesn't hesitate at all. He's quite cold in that sense.
right. And this is the first a fist fight in the teaser itself, but
Yep,
nowhere else. So this is
nowhere
also a
else.
first. Yeah.
And this fist fight was actually pretty small because you just have,
Right.
a shot. I mean,
Right.
it's pretty short because you just have Norman tossing people here and there, and that's it. You
That
can't
was
really
it.
fight him. Yep. You can't
Yeah.
really fight him.
After that, he shows off the fact that he's an android. He doesn't even say it, right? That
Yes,
I'm a robot or I'm not
he
human
doesn't
and this is
say it.
plastic. He just shows it, Here, look
True.
at my circuits. And I'm just
Yep,
going to
that's
turn
it.
off.
And I'm just going to go into some sort of suspended sleep. I don't know. He's going into hibernation for a while until they reach this planet, and nobody can move him.
Hmm.
Nobody can do anything to him. They just have to wait it out.
Yeah, I also liked Uhura and Chekhov's reaction to find this guy exactly in the middle when they're
Mm.
going about their duties, and this
Yes.
guy's right in the middle.
Yes, Uhura's especially was quite funny. She nearly walked into him and collided with him. I wonder about that. If had she collided with him, would he have reactivated, or would he just have fallen down?
I don't know. Being the huge hunk of metal that he is, I don't think
Yeah.
he
I
would.
mean, maybe she could have pushed him, and maybe he would have gone crosswired or something and malfunction.
He identifies who the landing party should be and
Yes,
check Kuhura, McCoy, and Spock. And
yes.
was there anybody else? Was there a security person? No, right? This
No,
is
there
it.
was no security. No, these were the only people that he said
Ah,
must
okay,
beam
okay,
down
okay.
onto the planet.
They get to see Harry Mudd.
Oh yes, that was quite
What an
the
intro.
revelation.
Yeah, what an intro to Mud. You don't see his face initially, and then
Yeah,
he's finishing up with gulping the last of the drink, and then they reveal, oh, here is Mud back again.
yes. And Kirk's reaction was also so good. He wasn't surprised exactly, and he was surprised and he's amused. And then Mud trying to talk his way out of this doesn't work because Kirk sees right through him and he knows exactly what he has done. He knows he has stolen those patents, stolen the ship, got fired at, and those Denevians also almost put him to death. So, and you remember that particular dialogue there, Bala, between Spock and Harry Mudd? He
Mhm.
said, "Do you know what the penalty is for fraud on Deneb 5 or something like that?" And Spock very helpfully says, "The guilty party has his choice: death by electrocution, death by gas, death by phaser, death by hanging." It's just,
And every time he hears the word death,
yeah,
Mud
death.
winces like, oh God, don't say that word again and again.
Yeah, death. And he calls them barbarians also.
Yeah, classic reaction, Mud reaction is like.
Yes.
And the way he pronounces death also is like as if somebody's going to hear it and probably pronounce it on him again.
Yes, it's death.
Yeah, he does that.
He does that. What an unpalatable word. Nobody should speak it, but
Oh boy, yeah. And then of course we see Stella, the
oh
nagging
yes.
wife's android version.
He had to have her behind that glass casing so that he could just see what he left behind and why he should go further deep into space and not come back. She's an
The way,
inspiration for him.
yeah, the
Yeah.
way she points that finger at him out of the glass
Yes.
case is like, oh, cool. And he just says, "Shut up, Stella."
And she just deactivates at that.
That's
He
it.
could
Yeah,
never
no,
do that
no,
with the real
no,
Stella.
no. I'm sure not. And he says the Stella is the what is it? What does he call it? The inspiration to be out on space like this. That's what he
Yes.
says.
Each time he hears her voice, he goes further deep into space and then away, far, far, far away, as far away as he can. Yes, she's
Hmm.
a very inspiring android woman, both.
That
Yes,
they find out the fact that they have not just the Alice series, but they have what
the
Macy,
Barbara
Annabelle,
series,
Barbara, Trudy.
Trudy, yes. And when Kirk asks him about having male androids, he's so disgusted by that. He says, "Male, I suppose they have their uses. Not for him, probably."
What good are they? I mean, what am I going
Yeah,
to do
I
with
mean,
them?
maybe they have their uses, but he prefers all these, glamorous female androids.
I like this Alice android. Those two good. Both of them. I think
Yes,
they were real twins. I don't think that was identical twins. And then
yeah,
of course they showed that as camera tricks where you could see six of them or eight of them.
6 or 8 of them.
Uh,
Yes,
uh, but I
mm,
liked how they have used twins wherever they could.
it's
Just for
true.
the one was a comical element that he's able to replicate all of them.
Yeah.
And I like the I don't think we're in the likes and dislikes sections, but this is the badges told you something also, right?
Oh, yes.
That they're
Yeah,
factory made and that they can make more of them if you want to. There are enough resources out there. All that
true.
was pretty cool.
The Alices were, I think, the most level-headed, even though they were. directly under Norman's control, or they were also linked to that hive mind, and all the
Mm,
androids are linked via Norman, and they create this hive mind sort of situation.
mm,
I think the Alice's were quite sedate compared
mm.
to something like a Norman, or even we don't see many of the other androids, but at
Right.
least, yeah, the Alice series is willing to talk to you and entertain you in a nice way. They're quite hospitable that way.
Mm. She says that they live for 500,000 years. Each model
Oh
can.
yes, that was about the Barbara series, I think.
Oh, is it? Okay, okay.
Something about their skeletons or their skin, and yeah, how they live for 500,000 years.
Uh,
It's amazing. That's a
and
long time.
that's what brings out Uhura's character trait also, and
Yes,
we've seen this in which one is this? I think the Naked Truth, where she's so worried about the one of the biggest fears for Uhura is that growing old and losing
yes,
her beauty and all that. So
yes.
this again, this surfaces in this episode as well.
True. She's thinking about immortality when one of the Alices, they offer to take her brain out and put it in a compatible android body, and she's just considering it. You find out later that she may not have been very serious about it because she's loyal to Kirk through and through,
Mm,
but it does cross her mind that this might be a good idea to live forever in a youthful body with your beauty kept, you know, perpetually in a state of, I don't know, how do you describe it? It's immortality. She never
right.
grows old. She's not going to
Absolutely.
suffer from anything. Yeah.
That's what leads to, Kirk quizzically looks at McCoy and says, "Okay, what have you found?" And McCoy says, "Oh, they have it absolutely. It's amazing with the facilities, the research. I can actually spend my entire lifetime here." And then that
Yes.
rings an alarm bell in Kirk's mind. I'm like, "Oh my God, is this what they have to offer to my people here?"
Exactly. They are going to offer them exactly what they want, things that they are passionate about, and then they're
Mm,
going to keep them there forever because they'll be so engrossed doing those things. For Scotty, they offer him engineering equipment and all sorts of tech that he's never seen before, and he's fascinated by it.
mm.
I think they do the same thing to McCoy, and they do it to Spock, but for some reason, Spock is a little aloof. He's
Right,
not too taken in by that. And Chekhov, of course, he's mighty impressed with the Alices, and he's wishing that they were real. So they have something to offer each crew member, and that's quite frightening.
right. Right. I thought about this because Chekhov says is better than Leningrad, with the Alice's saying, "Oh, we will." Chekhov says, "Oh, you're not real girls, are you?" And then says, "Oh, we are real girls in every sense of
Yep.
that word." So he's like, "Oh, that's amazing, and this is better." And Scott loves the workshop. Scotty can see all the fine work that he can get done,
Hmm.
and Uhura is promised immortality. And of course, now the entire crew is here with every 100,000 androids serving the crew, which means
Yes.
that they have so many, opportunities to get their needs fulfilled.
Hmm.
Kirk seems to be the only one who's unhappy. Just like you have Norman, who's there, who's controlling the entire android population, and here is
Yeah.
Kirk, who's supposed to be in charge of these 400 odd crew members, is the only one who seems to be completely unhappy with the setup.
True. And that I think is partly due to his human capricious nature. He knows that there's something wrong, and unlike the androids who are just so staid and quite boring actually because they can only go so far,
Mm.
humans need a lot of creativity and a lot of, you need some variety to live. The crew
Mm.
hasn't realized that this is going to be a gilded cage and they're going to be trapped there doing all these repetitive things for the rest of their lives. They haven't realized it yet, but
Mm.
Kirk, being the leader that he has realized it. And he I think one aspect that probably sets him apart from Norman is his human nature and that realization that they need to snap out of this. You can't stay there for the rest of your life because it's going to be absolute hell doing the same things again and again and again, and the human mind can only take so much of that. There needs to be some sort of a variety. The androids haven't figured that out yet, but
Mm.
Kirk knows, and he cares about the crew enough to try and somehow get them out of there. It's not some sort of a placid acceptance of the situation that they're in.
I thought of this, and I'm thinking, my thought was that maybe Kirk has his heart, yes, about his people and how they are being subjected to this. He has to command, but I think
Yeah.
deep inside, he needs that command, the leadership to
Yeah.
motivate him. And here, if he
Mm.
is in this gilded cage, as he calls it, there is no leadership for him, or there is no ship to command. So I think that's probably what kept him unhappy, because at that point in the third act, he says
Yeah.
Enterprise is a beautiful lady, and she's up
Yes.
there and I'm here. So it
And
sort
you
of
love as he
summarizes what,
says. Yeah.
yes, so I think it summarizes what Kirk has been missing.
True. He loses all sense of, he will lose all sense of command. He will lose his position. He loses everything, and nobody is going to pay any attention to him if they're going to be so wrapped up in their little activities that the androids have designed for them. For example, I don't think Scotty would come out of that workshop, that engineering workshop, for a very long time because they've given him all sorts of toys to play with.
Kirk, on the other hand, has the ship to lose, and to whom he loses it, to Mud. That's the
Yeah.
worst
I mean,
worst
not even Mud, it's the androids, and Mud is
androids,
their
and
trap.
Mud is in control of the Enterprise. That's the worst thing I can imagine.
Exactly. Until he realizes that Mud is also trapped there, and Mud realizes it, which is even funnier. But they really tricked him with that. The
Yes,
androids, I
yes,
mean, yeah.
absolutely. That's the part I couldn't really wrap my mind around. That if Norman and gang knew about Mud and why, and the fact that he's not the representative of humans and all that, still
Uh-huh.
they hung around him and served his every need and whim. Is that because they wanted more specimen through him to, and is that what the real reason for them to allow Mud to be in control like that?
I think basically they realized that he's a bit of an idiot and he can be manipulated. So they kept him under control, told him exactly what he wants to hear, gave him what he wants, gave him the illusion of power, and then he did exactly what they expected him to do, which is bring some other ship
That makes
for
sense.
their
Okay,
study.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. So he thinks he's in control. However, it was
Yep.
the androids who were in control and getting their work done.
And
Ah.
because he is so self absorbed and self involved, they told him what he wants to hear. They gave him that illusion of power. So when he says he wants more Alice's, he gets more Alice's. And then
Hmm,
he decides to call himself Mud the First because he has all this power. He
hmm,
actually doesn't have it, it's all
hmm,
an illusion, but
hmm.
he's just so wrapped up in his grandiose ideas and ideals and all of his dreams of having power and ruling over an entire planet. And they really played him. The androids really, really played him.
Imagine these 200,000 trying to now, quote unquote, serve the entire human race. That's how the third act
Yes.
ends. So
Yeah.
that is scary, right? So you
That
can.
is.
So it's sort of a conundrum on its own, right? So on the
Mm-hmm.
one hand, you want these machines to serve you, which is what they are
Yeah.
intended, and they're going to do that also. But
Yes.
by serving you, they're manipulating you just like how they manipulated Mud into getting
Mm.
what they want.
Yes. And
So
what
what
they
is it
want
that
is
they
just.
want? What is it that the androids want?
Yeah.
So that there is order in the society. Is that what they're going for? Is that how it is?
It seems like they want an absolutely peaceful, tranquil, sanitized universe or galaxy at least, where everything is in order, everything is logical, and they'll probably
Hmm.
find the Vulcans pretty good allies at that. But and they want to control, basically. They talk about serving, but their serving is basically bringing these living entities under their control and keeping them under their control so that they have no free will. Any free will that they think they have, as Mud also found out, that's not the real thing. He's not doing what he wants to do. Basically, he's forced to do what the androids want him to do. So I think they are in some sort of a super intelligent state where they think that everything else and everyone else is less intelligent and must be kept in order, as certain children may be kept under watch. And that's
Hmm.
what they want to do. They want to control these wayward, less intelligent biological creatures.
That is an interesting idea. That is, treat humans as children. So, which means children
Yes,
are served, right? Parents do serve their children in one way. They take care
they
of
do.
them, they feed them, do all that. So, they're serving. But
Yeah.
the parents who are in control of the kids, right? The
Exactly.
androids now act as parents as if they
Mhm.
were. That's a very interesting idea.
They really want to parent the human race. They feel
Mm.
that the human race is too young, too impulsive, too out of control, and they need some sort of a guiding hand. And the androids are willing to do it, even though nobody asked them.
The fourth act, of course, was to me a complete illogic show. It's, I don't know, comical in one sense and
Yeah.
idiotic in some other sense. But it's, I don't know. I think it dragged on maybe a little longer than I would have liked because, but they had to do it. I mean, something had to be done, and that had to be logical. It cannot be the regular things. So yeah. So what did you think about the fourth act and all those drama things that are going on?
Like you said, I did think it was a little too long, and at the same time, I was surprised it worked as quickly as it did. Their illogic. For
Hmm.
example, you come to the is it enough to deactivate just a few Alices out of the 200,000 androids that are online and connected to Norman? Is it enough to just deactivate three or four of them and then Norman feels a strain of just three or four? I imagine he would be aware that three or four would be deactivated, but at the same time, I think their actions worked a little too quickly,
Hmm.
even though it did get tedious by the time they got to that imaginary explosive and then throwing it here and there. It was funny, but a
Hmm.
little tedious. The saving grace there was Spock again. He was
Yeah.
talking about little tweeting. Logic is a little tweeting bird chirping in a meadow. Logic is a wreath of pretty flowers that smell bad. Your ears are green. That is so.
So I'm guessing that's his human half talking. That's what I felt, that because if it had been
Yeah.
the logical Spock, this would have seemed like complete nonsense to him, which it was.
Yeah.
It was
It
nonsense
was
even to a
nonsense.
human
And
being.
yeah, what he was saying was absolute nonsense, but the Vulcan in him was giving the tone, that deadpan tone. And that's
Ah,
that was
okay.
yeah, he was speaking as a Vulcan, but the words were completely human. I never knew that logic is a little bird chirping in a meadow.
Uh, I also
Yeah,
like that Spock was trying everything, which is he even tries to nerve pinch one of the Alices, and Alice is like, "Is does
Alice.
this have any significance? Are you trying to do something here?" I don't feel anything.
And then he tells one of them, I love you, and to the other one, I hate you. I hate you because you're identical, not because, not any other reason, because you're identical. That makes no sense.
Logic leading to complete illogic. Yeah, I can see that.
Complete logic.
Uh, yeah, that's but they do have this plan. I mean, to answer, I think you said that they're trying to prune the leaves and the branches, and then
Hmm.
now to the the head, Norman. That's
Yes.
how. Obviously, there's not enough time for to show their work at all of them,
Huh?
because I think the fourth act by itself still was too long. The first and it made up for all the time that we had in saved in first act, because first act
Mm.
was very short one, third was
Yeah,
sort of mid time, so fourth act was a bit elongated
it
because they had to
was.
bring in all these different sequences of McCoy and Scotty going back and forth, and that curtsying was awesome. with, with his index finger below his chin, and he goes curtsies like that.
Yes, I am impressed with their acting skills because they had to
Yes.
remember their lines, act like utter idiots. They had to
Yes.
remember all the logic of the entire situation. And I imagine they might have been quite frightened because these androids are superhuman in that sense. You never know
Yes.
what they'll do. On the other hand, Vara, I am so disappointed in the androids that after dealing with Harry Mudd for so long, they don't know what
Ah.
the human race is like. They can be utterly
Actually,
unpredictable.
that's the one thing that I didn't find so believable. Yes, I agree. Machines are based on logic and everything. Now,
Yeah.
I want to go try this on Chat GPT. If I can send out a completely illogical statement, what is it going to do? Because if let's say Norman and gang are now
Yeah.
have learned from 400 odd crew members, all of them,
Mhm.
they've imbibed
Yeah.
all these learnings, and now they're much better informed about humans and their abilities and what they have done. Shouldn't all this illogic be, oh yeah, these illogical human beings are acting it out again? Shouldn't it be that the case, rather than them completely, twisting up and down, and smoke coming out of their ears?
True, and they've dealt with Harry Mudd. How did they deal with
Yeah,
him without the smoke coming out of their ears?
you're
How did they
right,
do that?
right.
He is such a flamboyant, over the top, illogical, annoying character. They were able to deal with him, and then Kirk comes up with some rubbish in the short circuit that didn't even make sense.
They should have had all the learning of Harry Mudd and these
Yeah.
430 people. So, but they had to end this episode somehow. So you had to have the bad guys, quote unquote, Norman, smoke coming out of his ears. So, all right. But the way it ended was interesting. He says, Harry Mudd says, I'm lying. And he says, oh, if you are lying, that means you're saying that I'm speaking the truth, which means if you're speaking the truth, that means you're lying. And he goes like back and forth, and he completely gets, befuddled.
Deactivated, yes.
Yeah, he's just gone. He's gone.
He's gone. I never knew that saying nonsensical things like that could actually deactivate an android that was made in Andromeda and which has lived for how long? How many thousands of years have they been alive?
Here again are these makers, they mysteriously appear here also, right? This is
And
the third episode.
yeah,
I think we're seeing the makers
the
get into.
makers, yes.
Yeah,
The
and
makers made us.
right,
Mm,
they're long gone, they're dead, and here are the makers. In Doomsday Machine, we see that the makers
true.
make it and leave these things. They're referred to in what is that, what a little girl's made of. And
Mm.
there's another episode also, I think the makers are referred to.
We hear about them quite a few times. I think it's a convenient trope at this point. You just say the maker and they are mysterious and nobody knows about them. I wasn't too convinced with Norman's explanation of the makers and they are humanoid because you would naturally know more about them. And if I don't see any indication that these androids are capable of restraint, because they told Spock all sorts of things about taking the Enterprise out of orbit and then getting out of there. They're pretty straightforward. So why
Hmm.
wouldn't they tell them about the makers? If you had
Right.
just asked, they might have told them. I mean,
Why is it out of scope for because
exactly.
they seem to be conveying what do they keep repeating it throughout the episode?
Yes, I'm not in that area. What is it they
Something like
said?
that, right? So they keep
Yeah,
repeating that,
yeah.
and some
I'm
cases when the
yeah,
screenwriter felt that this cannot be something that or the explanation is something that we don't want to cover, they've used that
yeah.
dialogue.
Yeah,
So
the phrase is I am not programmed to respond in that area. That way you don't get any answers and everything is mysterious.
after their success with Norman, Mud
Yeah.
immediately looks at Kirk and says, "Ooh, that was fun. Maybe we should get into a partnership arrangement." And like, wow, Mud and Kirk getting into a partnership. How is that going to work?
That would actually be quite hilarious. I would have liked that. It would.
End of what is that? The oh my god, what is that episode? The Venus drug and all that, which is where Mud
Yes,
shows
that
up
was
first.
Mud's women.
Mud's women. So
Yep,
in that also, Mud agrees to collaborate with Kirk at the
true.
end, right? So that whatever they can get out of the situation, and that's why he's not given a punishment. He's only handed over to the authorities, and that's it, right? So
Yeah.
he doesn't end up in jail because of that. That he actually
Hmm.
collaborated with Kirk
Yeah,
towards the end. So
true.
Kirk does find some use for Mud. He does find out, you know, that Mud can be useful. However, he has to draw the line because this guy's clearly violated laws and he's a criminal. So he can't
He is
obviously just say, okay, Mud, you go scot free. He can't do that.
I think they're more similar than Kirk would like to admit. He even gets Harry Mudd's humor. They're so
Yes.
similar, but they
Yeah.
just happen to be on two different sides of the law. Kirk has to be this upright, law-abiding, absolutely upright captain, and Harry Mudd can do what he wants. I mean, he doesn't really care about anything. He's
Yeah.
just Harry Mudd.
And this one it says, "Oh, we have a special Android made especially for you." And immediately,
Yes.
Mud's reaction is, "Oh wow, that is unexpectedly civil of you." And little does he know.
Yeah, little does he know that going to get 500 Stellas. What a waste of resources. 500, two of them would have done.
You had a thought-provoking question for me. Maybe we
Yeah.
can have that as the hypothetical question. Maybe we can,
Okay.
in your question, we can use it for that. Let's go to our likes and dislikes. Was there something
Okay.
that you liked about this episode?
I liked all of it and I really enjoyed this episode. It was fun, it was light-hearted. There were some moments where nothing made sense, especially when it came to the androids and the world they were trying to create, the absolute galaxy that they were trying to create. There were a lot of things that didn't make sense, but I still enjoyed this a great deal. Perhaps they could have gone over the part where the androids were short circuited so quickly,
Mm.
because, as McCoy says, they are physically and mentally perfect. That's the word he uses, perfect. So, if something is that perfect, they should know better than to, have their wires crossed just because Kirk said something very nonsensical or just because Spock said something nonsensical. Okay, maybe if Spock said something nonsensical, they would short circuit. But at it didn't make much sense to me that they were able to deactivate these alien androids so quickly, and I was a little disappointed by that. That is
Mm.
probably the only thing that I disliked as such.
Last time we discussed Mud's women, we
Yes,
went over the character pretty much. I think 60-70% of the episode was about Mud, the character.
yes,
I think the same here. Thankfully, this episode was not only about Mud, but he was a big part of this. So I definitely, that's my first like. Second one is the deeper meaning in this, the
mm,
inner desires of human beings.
yeah,
If they come to fruition without much effort, it totally makes us lazy. Sort of a moral for me.
correct,
I took from here. So that's what they seem to be hinting at. That was a very
exactly.
interesting sort of theme to work on, and I like that. And how about how androids can think of the human race as children?
Yes,
That's something I learned during the recording of this episode. That was interesting.
yes,
Of course, Stella was a memorable character for me, although she just is there for a few, I don't know, maybe less than a minute screen
yeah,
presence. But she
yeah, just for a few
absolutely
seconds.
lovable character for me. I just love it. And the last was this "I am lying" syndrome that
Oh, yes,
finally switches.
everything I say is a lie. And
Everything I
listen
say
to
is
me carefully, Norman, I'm lying. So,
a
poor Norman.
yeah, that was awesome. That is really really nice. So those are the likes. The dislikes for me was this illogical drama. It had to be there. I don't think I disapprove of that idea, so to speak, but I
Mhm.
really liked that. But I thought it went on a bit longer than what I would have liked. Again, so
True.
that's my personal preference here.
Yeah.
The threats that androids made at the end of third act was a bit too quick and forced for me. It looked like they
Mm,
wanted some heightened action. So usually in some of the better episodes that we've talked about,
yeah.
it always feels like they're going from, what do you call it, the escalating tension, right? So at the end of every act, there's escalating tension. I get that's what they were trying to do here, but it seemed
Mm.
suddenly from the landing party to the crew to suddenly the human race. So that was a bit too much for me to absorb. So that
And
was
it went from the human race to the entire galaxy. That was
Galaxy,
quick.
yes. Yes.
That was very
Uh,
quick.
yeah. Oh, one like was also was there was only one fist fight, and I don't think it was overdone. So usually these
Yeah.
fist fights go on a little longer, but this one was actually perfect timing for me.
Oh
And
yeah. I like this fist fight. Let's give
uh,
all the fights to Norman. He'll finish them in a few seconds by just tossing them to the wall, onto this wall, and then you toss the other guy onto the other wall, and that's it. The
and
end.
that was it. Yeah.
That is it.
Or a chop on their shoulder and a bam,
That's
and
it.
they're done.
And that's it.
Okay, now instead of the hypothetical question that we usually ask, let's ask your
Yeah.
question. What is the question that you have in your mind, Parvati?
Okay, so this is the one thing that was constantly bothering me throughout this episode, and that is the appearance of Stella. Now, when you see Stella for the first time, this is an android replica of the actual Stella. The way she talks to our dear friend Harry Mudd is very abrasive. She's yelling at him, she's pointing at him, she calls him a good for nothing and all sorts of names. Now, what I would like to know is this some sort of abuse that he's trying to escape because he wants to get away from her? He wants to get away from her constant and incessant nagging, to quote him. So it made me wonder, are they showing some kind of domestic abuse? I know it's funny. It's a very humorous scene. And it kind of disturbed me on some level. What if the roles had been reversed? Would it have worked as well? Would it have been funny if they had shown a male equivalent of Stella, and if Harry Mudd's character had been female? Would it have worked? Then your obvious reaction would have been that it's some sort of domestic abuse, and that was bothering me a little bit, whether Stella was just abusive towards him and he was trying to get away. But it was funny because he is a guy, and the wife is the woman who's yelling at him constantly is a woman. It's a woman, and it's okay. Is it okay to do that sort of thing because it's a man? I don't know. It bothered me, Bala, and that's something I would like to put across to them. What were they trying to show exactly?
Hmm. Yeah, I get it. If you had reversed the roles, it probably is like Cinderella, right? So the
Hmm.
girl has to go through all that, listen to everything, and that probably is. I mean, here in a light way, they show that that is Harry Mudd's motivation to be in space like this as a pirate. But if it had been the woman who's on the run like this, or maybe in a domestic situation, it would have been motivation for her to do something, or it could have been easily construed as, like you said, used to use your words as domestic abuse. Yeah,
Yes.
I would think so. Yeah, I would definitely think so. I agree on that front.
And it was also taken in that light. I think Kirk's action at the end was a little bit cruel that he had 500 of those Stella androids created just to torment Mud. Now, assuming that he had a very turbulent relationship at home that caused him to maybe drink and flee, why would you reintroduce him to that same environment magnified by 500? That I I was a little uncomfortable by that. It was still humorous, of course, because it's a light-hearted scene that they showed, but at the same time, the implications were a little bit disturbing.
Hmm. Interesting. So we'll keep it open as that. So I don't
Yes.
think there's a conclusion here, but very very
No
interesting
conclusion.
thought.
Yes.
Okay. So a funny episode, interesting premise, and an interesting solution at the end, and of course a thought-provoking question also at the end. Okay. So with that, we come to the end of the episode. Thank you so much, Parvati. This is fun
Thank
talking
you.
about and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you and bye.
Bye, everyone.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening to the podcast Enterprise. Please do share your reviews with us, and please share this podcast with any of your writing friends or trickies. Live long and prosper.